In the brutal ecosystem of a maximum security prison, the currency of power is typically simple: violence, fear, and influence. But inside the notorious walls of Puente Grande, a place that has housed legends like El Chapo, one man's survival depended on a currency far more refined. His name was Alejandro Vargas, but they called him El Maestro, the Master. He was not a killer or a cartel foot soldier. He was a world-class art forger, a man whose hands could replicate the brushstrokes of geniuses. Imprisoned after a deal to replicate a lost colonial painting went wrong, he was an anomaly, an artist in a cage of animals. This is the story of how his unique, delicate gift became the most sought-after weapon in the prison. It is the story of an impossible task given to him by a new, ambitious cartel leader who didn't want money or drugs. He wanted El Maestro to forge history itself, to create a lie so powerful it could crown him a king and ignite a war. This is the story of a man forced to create his own masterpiece of deception, knowing a flawed stroke would mean his death, while a perfect one might kill hundreds more. Alejandro entered Puente Grande with nothing but the clothes on his back and a 20-year sentence. The prison was a city of concrete and sun, a place where history lingered in the shadows of past riots and legendary escapes. He was a man of quiet contemplation, of patient detail, and this world was a violent, chaotic assault on his senses. His hands, which had once delicately restored 17th century canvases, were now calloused from laundry duty and scrubbing floors. He kept to himself, a ghost in the swirling, dangerous currents of the prison yard, sketching portraits of inmates on scraps of paper in exchange for extra food or protection. His skill was a curiosity, a small parlor trick in a world that only respected brute force. But legends of his talent on the outside, of fooling auction houses in Paris and collectors in New York, had followed him in. The prison's true power was held by warring factions of the new cartels, younger, more ruthless men who had replaced the old guard. The most ambitious of these was a lieutenant named Ricardo El Geraldo, Solis the Herald. El Geraldo was different. He was not just a brute. He was obsessed with legacy, with creating a myth around himself. He heard the whispers about the forger, about El Maestro, and saw an opportunity to craft his own legend. One day, Alejandro was summoned. Two of El Geraldo's heavily tattooed sicarios escorted him to a secluded corner of the yard. El Geraldo was sitting on a bench, not with the posture of a thug, but of a collector admiring a new piece. El Maestro, he said, his voice smooth and educated. I have heard your hands can make paper lie and ink sing. I am just a painter. Alejandro replied, his eyes downcast. No, El Geraldo said, leaning forward. You are a kingmaker, and I need you to make me a king. He explained his demand. It wasn't money. It wasn't a passport for an escape. He wanted Alejandro to forge a personal letter from the revolutionary hero, Emiliano Zapata. The letter was to be addressed to El Geraldo's great-grandfather, praising his courage and anointing his family line as true guardians of the people. It was a complete fiction, a historical fantasy designed to create a powerful, mythical lineage for El Geraldo. He planned to use it to unify factions under his banner, to claim he was destined to lead. Alejandro was horrified. That's impossible, he whispered. The paper, the ink, the aging. It cannot be done here. El Geraldo smiled, a chilling, predatory expression. You are El Maestro. You will find a way. He then gestured to a young, terrified inmate named Carlos, a boy who cleaned the cells and who Alejandro had befriended, sketching his family from a worn photograph. Find a way, El Geraldo repeated, or I will give Carlos a very short, very painful history lesson. Alejandro was trapped. His gift, his art, had become a weapon pointed at an innocent boy's head. His cell became a secret, desperate laboratory. He knew he needed specific materials to even attempt such a forgery. He traded his artistic talents for the ingredients of his curse. A portrait of a guard's wife in exchange for a handful of rust shavings from an old pipe. A beautifully rendered drawing of a saint for an inmate in the kitchen, who smuggled him berries and onion skins. He boiled the berries and rust to create a sepia ink, chemically similar to the iron gall ink of the early 20th century. He stole a tattered blank end paper from an old Bible in the prison library, paper from the correct era. To age it, he exposed it to the sun, stained it with weak tea, and carefully folded it hundreds of times to match the wear of a century-old document. His tools were primitive, a sharpened bird bone for a quill, a piece of broken glass for trimming the paper. He spent weeks studying Zapata's handwriting from a history book, practicing the slant, the pressure of each stroke, until his hand moved with the ghost of the revolutionaries. He worked at night, by the dim glow of a contraband light, the weight of his task pressing down on him. He knew he wasn't just forging a letter. He was forging a weapon, a declaration of war. A successful forgery would give El Heraldo the legitimacy to rally followers and start a bloody conflict with a rival faction led by a man named Mendoza. A failed forgery would mean his own death and likely Carlos's too. As he worked, he realized there had to be a third option. A way to survive without crowning a monster. He decided to build a flaw into his masterpiece. A perfect imperfection. He added a trace amount of a modern polymer, scraped from the handle of a toothbrush, into his ink mixture. It was invisible to the naked eye. It wouldn't affect the look or feel of the document at all. But it was a chemical signature, an anachronism that he, and only he, could identify. A secret kill switch. The day he finished, he felt a profound emptiness. The letter was a work of art, beautiful and utterly false. He presented it to El Heraldo, who looked at it with reverent awe. "It is perfect," El Heraldo whispered, tracing the forged signature. "It is destiny." El Heraldo arranged a parley with his rival Mendoza in the center of the prison yard. It was a tense, theatrical affair. Both leaders were surrounded by their lieutenants. The rest of the prison population watched from a distance, smelling blood in the air. "I have called you here to show you my birthright," El Heraldo announced, his voice booming with false authority. He held up the letter. "A message from Zapata himself, naming my bloodline as the rightful leaders." Mendoza, an older, more traditional narco, scoffed. "You present a piece of paper as a crown?" "This is not paper," El Heraldo declared. "This is history. El Maestro, come forward. Tell him what this is." This was the moment. Alejandro was shoved into the center of the circle. He took the letter, his hand steady. He held it up to the light. "It is a masterpiece of forgery," Alejandro said, his voice clear and calm. The yard went silent. El Heraldo's face turned from triumph to disbelief, then to pure rage. "What did you say?" he hissed. "I said it is a fake," Alejandro continued, pointing to a specific word. "The ink here on the downstroke of the Z. It contains a secret." He explained the polymer, the invisible flaw that he alone knew was there. "It is a lie," Alejandro finished, looking directly at El Heraldo. "Just like your claim to power, the humiliation was absolute." El Heraldo, exposed as a fraud in front of his men and his greatest rival, let out a roar of fury and lunged for Alejandro. But Mendoza's men were faster. The parley exploded into a brutal, targeted attack. In the chaos, Mendoza's sicarios shielded Alejandro, pulling him away from the fray. They had no love for him, but they respected the sheer, cold audacity of his move. He had unmade a king with a drop of ink. El Heraldo's power, built on a carefully constructed myth, shattered in an instant. His own men hesitated, their loyalty broken. He was overwhelmed and killed in the ensuing brawl. Alejandro Vargas survived. He became a neutral, respected figure in Puente Grande, a legend in his own right. He was the man no one dared to cross, not because he was violent, but because his mind was a weapon no one could predict. He served the rest of his sentence in relative peace, sketching portraits, a quiet artist who had painted his own survival. When he was finally released, he walked out into the sun, leaving his past in the shadows of the prison. He never picked up a brush to forge again. His greatest masterpiece was the life he had reclaimed. The story of El Maestro is a testament to the fact that in the fight for survival, the sharpest weapon is not always a blade. Sometimes it is a brilliant, creative mind. If you found this story compelling, please hit the like button and subscribe to Prison Files. Ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. What prison should we investigate next? Let us know in the comments below.